Tonight we're learning that there's another Buffett rule legendary investor Warren Buffett can lend his name to. Only this time the Obama administration may not want to roll out the red carpet for it. The Securities and Exchange Commission has been shielding Warren Buffett from public scrutiny over the past 8 months as his company, Berkshire Hathaway, soaked up an over 5% stake in IBM, news that rocked the technology sector in yesterday's trading session. Here to discuss now are my freedom fighters, Fox Business senior correspondent and my colleague Dunstan Pryal, radio host Nancy Skinner, and James Otteson, Yeshiva University professor of economics. Nancy, I'm dying to know how you think about this. So do you first. Is this guy entitled to an exemption from the laws that are supposed to be enforced on every publicly traded corporation because he's so rich, because his decisions are so smart, and he's such a good friend of the president?
No, Judge, and I am so with you on this one. He should not, okay? These F3 exemptions are junk, and the invisible hand that Adam Smith envisioned wasn't letting these big guys make secret plays behind the scenes.
Right.
But Goldman Sachs did the same thing. They're pushing instruments that they're shorting. So all of that has to be on the record so people can make informed decisions. That's capitalism.
Got it. Does the SEC, Professor, should the SEC have this kind of discretion to exempt somebody as well known as he is from an accumulation as massive as 5% of IBM?
No, of course not. But on the other hand, I don't think we can blame Buffett for this, Judge.
Right.
He's just acting rationally. When you have a set of rules, remember in the Rule 13F, there is an explicit exception allowed to the SEC. They have the discretion to withhold exposure, withhold revealing the information if they want to. If you're going to have this exception, you're going to have people like Buffett who are making use of it.
Well,
why not?
Dunstan, what does Wall Street think of this when the rules are enforced against everybody but one, and he happens to be the king of the hill?
Judge, I'm going to go big picture on you. I spent today, there was a big story down at Occupy Wall Street tonight. Right. Can they go? Can they stay? Right. I don't think I'd be able to explain the minutia of this loophole to the folks down there, but they'll get the big picture. The rules are different for rich people, you know, and it's easy for Warren Buffett to defend something like this because we like Warren Buffett and he's our grandfather and all the rest. But the rules are different for him than they are for me. Why isn't there a rule in place for Dunstan to make more money? You know, because I don't have the money to buy the politicians in Wall Street down in...
Do you know if this you can accept whoever you want from the enforcement of your regulations in the SEC Act has ever been challenged? Because this is not equal treatment of people similarly situated.
No, not only hasn't it been challenged, but there was an audit done in 2010. It turns out that over 90% of the exceptions they granted were done without any oversight. So it's essentially one regulator. So all Warren Buffett has to do, or it's not just Warren Buffett, there are other very wealthy investors as well. All they have to do is convince just one regulator. Would you keep this under the rug for me for a little bit? That's all they have to do.
Got it. Switching gears. It's the kind of airport nightmare. No, hang on, Nancy. I'll go to you first on this one. It's the kind of airport nightmare no traveler wants to deal with. A few months ago, a regional affiliate of American Airlines kept over 600 passengers from 15 different flights on the tarmac for over 3 hours. The Department of Transportation swooped in and slapped American Airlines with a $900,000 fine. That's the largest ever paid in a consumer case not involving civil rights violations. However, it is arguable that it is the government which regulates the airport, the government which caused the delays, and the government which collects the fines, not the passengers, Nancy Skinner. What the heck is fair about this? You sit on a runway for 6 hours and the government makes the money and not you?
Judge, as a good libertarian, you should be appalled that a corporate entity can keep you beyond your will for 10 hours without food, water, or toilets. And if you want to go back to that gate and get a refund and catch another flight, you can't. If the government did the same thing to you, Judge, you would be apoplectic. So what they're trying to do is say, hey, you can't do that. It's fraud and it's personal freedom.
Okay, I agree with everything you said, but shouldn't the passengers get the money? Let's look at it this way. The federal government regulates the airports. The federal government controls the airways. The federal government arguably caused these delays, and the federal government is making money from the fines. Shouldn't the people who suffered in the environments Nancy just described, no food, no water, no fresh air, no toilets, shouldn't they get the fines?
Absolutely, but you have to remember that what's going on in this case is that the airlines have two masters, not one. The one master is the consumer, the person who's flying on a plane, but they also have to pay attention to the FAA. The CEO of the American Airlines issued a statement in which he said, we do everything we can to comply with FAA regulations. That's the problem. They're not worried about the consumer. They're worried about the FAA regulations.
Dunstan, would you stir this pot, please?
Yes, I am. And Judge, I'm going to side with the government on this one. Heaven help me. And I'm going to do it for one reason.
Skinner is jumping for joy.
The reason I'm going to do that, it's working. According to the statistics, a year ahead, before these penalties were implemented, 690 of these instances, something like that, since the rules were implemented and the fines put in place, down to 20, 30, something like that. So if it's working and the government put it in place, I'm on board.
Nancy, doesn't your big heart for the little guy want some of that money to go to the people who suffered in that smelly environment of stench rather than to Tim Geithner's coffers in Washington, D.C. for him to waste? Go ahead.
You know what? You need a big stick to get them to do that, and that's why they went down. They bump you voluntarily, but you know what? They know it's not all the FAA's fault. They know the weather situation. They know that they've overbooked flights. They know you're going to be sitting on that tarmac for 5 hours, so they should be penalized for that.
I really think that the passengers should get some of the money, and that would be an inducement. We just have a few seconds, Professor.
You have to look at what's seen and what's unseen. What's seen is that the tarmac times have gone down. That's true. But what's unseen is all the additional costs that have been layered on and inflexible routes, times that passengers are not able to fly to certain routes. All of that is the unseen cost that's not in the regulation.
Nancy Skinner, James Otteson, Dunstan Pryl, it's a pleasure, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Judge.
I'll tell you more tales from the secret super committee's crypt. That's coming up next.